All right. So yeah, as Holly said, this is a really big deal. The IRA includes $60 billion for communities and environmental justice, $33 billion to expand and improve, decarbonize the public transportation, $2.7 billion, $27 billion for clean energy and technology, aka the Green Bank, $214 billion for clean energy tax incentives, which you'll hear about later, $9 billion for electrification of appliances, and a whole bunch of other things that really make this a pretty big deal. But because it is a pretty big deal, it's a lot in there. And so that's why we want to take this opportunity to talk about what does it actually mean for you. But once again, we want to just like talk about the impact of what the IRA would actually do. If you look at that very top line in black, you see if we did absolutely nothing, that is business as usual. And, you know, corporations on their own have been more committed to climate in recent years than before, but you see not much is happening there. But then you take 2 years ago, they passed the bipartisan infrastructure law that did have some climate benefits, and you see there's a little bit more improvement. But the really big jump you see is in purple, which is the Inflation Reduction Act. And that's the thing that we are so proud that we were able to get past last year because it's going to get us close to our goal. And to remind everyone of our goal, it was 50 to 52% emission reductions by 2035. And this puts us in striking distance where Biden can do additional things through the EPA and executive action. And then states can do a little bit more to get us to that 50 to 52%. But it's going to take all of us. It's not just on government. It's also going to take us as individuals to electrify ourselves and change our habits as well. And so let's just jump into that. So what does it mean for me? And so Rewiring America has this great calculator where you can plug in your information and it gives you a whole host of things that you are eligible for, whether it's rebates, tax credits. And after I get done speaking, I'm going to actually walk through this calculator so you can see how it works. So electrification rebates. And so one of the first things that you'll have to do is, upgrade your electric panel because electrification, you're talking about maybe putting solar panels on your roof, electric stove, maybe a charger for your electric vehicle. So there's a lot of electrification happening in your home, and you probably don't have the wiring, the panels, and all the upgrades and retrofits necessary to, maintain all that. And so there's a great electrification rebate program through the Department of Energy that helps you make that transition. So for low-income households, electrification for electric panels, they cover 100% of the costs. For moderate income households, that's 50% of the cost. And for both low and moderate income, that's up to $4,000. Now, how do they define low income households? That's 80% around the median income of your local area. And then for moderate income, that's between 80% and 150% of your local median income. And so that's going to vary by zip code or where you live. And so you can just do a little census lookup, and then you can calculate what that actually means for you in your neighborhood. In addition to that, there's actually a tax credit through the IRS, tax credit 25C, which provides 30% tax credit for electric panels upgrade up to a cap of $600. And so, but you have to do that in conjunction with other upgrades like in a heat pump or a water heater, electric water heater. So you're doing some kind of other upgrade. And if you do both together, you can get an additional 30% tax credit. And then 25D, specifically, you get 30% and it's uncapped tax credit. And that's in conjunction with rooftop solar, which I'm sure my friend Leah is going to talk about later on. So along with upgrading your panel, you're going to also want to focus on some wiring. So for low income households, you can get 100% covered up to $2,500. For moderate households, 50% up to $2,500. And remember, low income is below 80%. Moderate is from 80 to 150% of the local income. And so upgrading your wiring itself is not necessarily a money saver, but like I said, when you're electrifying your entire home, you're going to need to upgrade your wiring, your panel, and some of all your sort of infrastructure to be able to withstand that capacity. So in addition, you can get appliances. So for low income households, you can get an electrification rebate that covers 100% of an electric or induction stove up to $840. And then for moderate income households, it's 50% up to $840. You can also get heat pumps up to $1,750. If you're low income, that's 100%. And for moderate, again, it's 50%. And weatherization is really important. And so a lot of folks, before you start electrifying, like weatherization and energy efficiency is where you want to actually start. You want to get better insulation, air sealing, ventilation. For low income households, 100% up to $1,600, and then 50% for moderate up to $1,600. So you want to start with the energy efficiency stuff, and then you want to get to upgrading with the panels and the wiring. So then you can start putting all the appliances on top of that new infrastructure in your home. And so there's the secondary, and this is related to states, but you should be on the lookout for this. And so there's $550 million for block grants, which if your state has a program that is set up with eligible for it, they'll automatically get this pot of money. So I'm also doing some state policy in Maryland. And so there is an effort to reform the Empower program. So it lines up with federal requirements so they can so the state of Maryland can actually get their portion of this block grant. And what that will allow you to do is have even more savings and more rebates related to energy efficiency. And so like keep an eye out, like if you live in Maryland, I know the program is called Empower. If you're in Virginia or some other state, I'm not sure, maybe you can reach out to organizations in that state and figure out exactly what it is. But this is going to be a really big money saver for so many people. So keep an eye out for your state's energy efficiency program. So electric vehicles. I know a lot of people have been keeping an eye out on that. And so if you meet all the requirements, you can get a tax credit up to $7,500. And starting this, it was supposed to start this year where you get, it had to be assembled in North America for you to get that full tax credit. But the IRS has been a little slow to roll out that language. So all EVs at this current moment are tax credits up to $7,500. That loophole is going to close any day now. So go out and get your electric vehicle because once it goes into play, then you'll see if it's not assembled, then you lose half of that tax credit over the next few decades, or not decades, next few years. Some other things to keep in mind that are really important, and I think this is going to make a really big difference, that starting next year, because right now it's just a tax credit, you have to buy the car, and then when you file your taxes, you can get that money back. But next year, that is going to be transferred over to the dealer, and then it becomes a point of sale. And so that's going to really help a lot of low income and moderate income family households really be able to take advantage of the EV tax credits. And EVs can't cost more than $5,500. SUVs and light trucks can't cost over $80,000. And then the person using the tax credit can only make between 150, no more than 150,000, and then joint filers over 300,000. And then for used electric vehicles, you see it's not the full 7,500, but it is capped at 4,000. And so just really quickly, I just want to go through the calculator itself so you can see how it works. I'm just going to throw in a hypothetical person. You can see I already have filled this out a few different times. A homeowner, let's just go with the 65,000. And I am a single filer, so I'll just keep it for myself and calculate. And so you see right off the top, you see upfront discounts, 14,000, available tax credits, $6,550, and estimated energy savings for me personally, $1,550. Total incentives, $20,550. That's fantastic. And so if you scroll down further, then you'll actually see all the rebates that I can actually use. And all you have to do is click more, and it'll tell you whether it's a DOE program or an IRS program. And if it is a tax credit, it'll specifically tell you what the tax credit number is. And so this is a great, useful tool. And when we do the follow-up email for this webinar, we're going to send you links to this so you will have it at your fingertip. So I'm going to then change this over to renter so you can see it actually does make a difference. There are a lot fewer programs available to renters. And you see, like, just by switching over to renter, I lost a whole bunch of different incentives. I can get an electric stove, clothes dryer, and some other things, and electric vehicles. So this is a very useful tool to really, so when you dive in, you can really sort of like make it personal for you, and it'll be a really good guide to exactly what you can use and can't use. And so going back to, let's end that. And I think I'm passing it over to you, Holly.
Yeah, but where'd the presentation go?
Yeah.
You're going to get it back up. Yeah. And I realized at the beginning I introduced everyone else, but I didn't introduce myself. So I'll take this little pause to do that. I'm Holly Bradley. I am the West Virginia organizer with Chesapeake Climate Action Network. And I am also a farmer. Me and my husband farm organic vegetables in Pocahontas County. And so I'm the obvious choice to talk about the agriculture and forestry provisions. So with the IRA, there were no new like bills or anything like that made for agriculture and forestry. These are all existing, they just basically boosted the funding for existing programs. But as you can see, it's still going to make an impact. So 380,000 jobs to support farmers who use regenerative practices, which is an agricultural way to decrease climate change. So it's like a great way to strengthen drought resistance and boost productivity. There will also be 50,000 jobs to help coastal communities build protection and resiliency from climate disasters. There will also be $100,000 from grants and investments to protect and restore forests in support of climate resilience and healthy ecosystems. And then lastly, 20,000 jobs from investments to protect and restore public lands. And then next slide. And then here is the 20 billion broke down that the Inflation Reduction Act has boosted the funding for with the USDA's existing conservation programs. So 8.45 billion for environmental quality incentives program, 4.95 billion for the regional conservation partnership program, 3.25 billion for the conservation stewardship program, 1.4 billion for the agricultural conservation easement program, and 1 billion for the conservation technical assistance program. So those are some of like the ag stuff, and I'm gonna pass it over to Leah. She's gonna dive a little deeper into all the solar aspects, and also let if there are any farmers on the call, let farmers and rural business owners figure out how they can go solar much cheaper.
Thanks, Holly. Yeah, lots of exciting stuff included in this bill. So I just want to extend my gratitude for y'all inviting me to share about what some of those provisions are. As Holly mentioned, my name is Leah Barber, and I'm West Virginia State Director with Solar United Neighbors. And for those who are maybe not familiar with SUN, we're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we help people join together, go solar, and fight for their energy rights. And so a big part of that work is educating people about legislation that enables expanded access to solar energy, and the Inflation Reduction Act definitely achieves that. And next slide, please. So the IRA is the most pro-solar legislation that has ever been passed, and that represents a huge leap forward in scaling and broadening access to distributed solar. Next slide, please. One of the things I love most about this work is learning new things and then applying that to our work in order to expand solar adoption throughout the country. And so you can imagine how exciting this has been to digest this new legislation over recent months. But with that said, there's still a lot left to understand about how these provisions will be implemented. And so what I'm sharing today is what we know already, and we hope that you'll stay tuned with us as our work and the full details of the impact of this legislation becomes clearer in the months and even years ahead. So my goal is to do my best to highlight provisions that have been issued along with the initial guidance that's come out through recent rulemaking. And I'll also try to flag when we expect to hear about specific solar provisions as well. And so, as I said, this is an unprecedented level of investment in clean energy and distributed solar. As Quentin and Holly both mentioned, this really spurs rapid growth in our United States clean energy economy, significant emissions reduction by the end of the decade. And I'm going to chat about some of these consumer incentives as they relate to rooftop and community solar and batteries. And we just heard about the EVs and electrification measures. I really enjoyed looking at the IRA calculator myself and seeing what me and my family would qualify for. So I definitely encourage y'all to dive into that because it's pretty fun. And then there are also some really strong equity provisions that enhance and broadens solar access as well. Next slide, please. So these stats are from the White House fact sheet on the bill, and what they came as far as how we're expanding solar deployment. It's projected to save an average family who takes advantage of these available incentives over $1,000 each year. It enables 7.5 million families to install solar on their roofs or at their properties, and also creates millions of jobs to help protect Americans' health, preventing up to 3,900 premature deaths and up to 100,000 asthma attacks due to the reduction of fossil fuels. So again, some really significant and achievable impacts of this bill. Next slide, please. And again, oops, alrighty. Okay, so as Quentin alluded to, we had some restoration of the investment tax credit. And so this bill restores the solar investment tax credit back up to the full 30% over the next 10 years. And so that took effect retroactively in 2022, and it will continue to be at that 30% for the next decade. Drop down to 26% in 2033, and then down to 22% in 2034. Another thing that the IRA achieves is it allows entities with no tax liability to apply for direct pay reimbursement that's equal to the value of the tax credit. So this is huge. It makes the bottom line for folks a lot more achievable. And so this includes nonprofit organizations, schools, public schools, nonprofit faith-based and religious organizations, local and state governments, tribal governments, and also rural electric co-ops. It's important to note that the Treasury Department and the IRS are working to release guidance over the course of the year about how these tax-exempt organizations can apply for reimbursement and when they can expect repayment. So for now, organizations should expect that they'll need to pay for the upfront cost of the system, so arranging your financing accordingly, and then receive the payment, the direct payment, within 1 to 2 years. Another thing that was affected within the ITC is that battery storage is now eligible for solar plus storage, as well as standalone with no solar. So if you're adding storage to your existing system or adding additional storage, for example, you're eligible for the 30% ITC baseline. However, not for the adders that I plan to discuss here in just a few slides. Actually, in the next slide, you can go next. Okay, so the investment, or the ITC, now includes 6 additional provisions that you can think of as bonus credits. And this graphic that's on this slide here was created by the Clean Energy Group. It's the best one that I've seen that represents how these additional provisions are actually going to function. So these can significantly increase savings for projects that serve low income and underserved communities. And so these are all in addition to that baseline 30% investment tax credit. And as I mentioned earlier, have a really dramatic impact on a project's bottom line. They have the potential to raise the value of the ITC to cover up to 70% of the cost of the project's installation. And so we're going to take a closer look at these adders and talk about which of them are available now. So this project here that's in the blue bracket at the bottom describes the low income communities bonus credit program. And so we just recently got guidance from the IRS. Their preliminary or initial guidance was released on February 13th. So we're still expecting to see additional guidance on that program later this year. And currently projects can apply for one of the 4 bonus credits that you see listed here. These are all for projects that are up to 5 megawatts in size. And so they allocate for 10% bonus for projects that are located in a low income community, 10% for projects located on tribal land, 20% for projects where the facility is part of a qualified low income residential project, and then 20% for projects where the facility is part of a qualified low income economic benefit project. And at that link down there at the bottom, the Clean Energy Group has expanded definitions of what those 4 things are. Excuse me one moment. Okay, I appreciate your patience. So picking up where I left off, these other 2 credits here that are outlined under the green bracket are stackable credits, but we don't have the rulemaking or the guidance related to those yet. And so currently we can't apply for those, but in the future, you'll be able to, if a project qualifies for both the domestic content adder and the energy community adder, those will be in addition to that 30% base credit, and then either the 10 or 20% that are outlined in the low income communities bonus credit program. Much like the electric vehicles domestic content or assemblage like specification, it's the same thing for these projects as well. So I think as time goes on, and I'm not sure exactly what the timeline is, but with an expanded amount of time, that eligibility for domestic content provision will start to taper down. And so this 10% bonus for projects that are located in an energy community, it'll be a specific percent of credit for projects that can be sited at brownfield sites, areas with above average unemployment and high employment in fossil fuel industries, and also communities who have experienced recent coal mine closures or coal power plant retirements as well. And then that domestic manufacturing requirement will be for projects that are less than 1 megawatt that meet domestic content requirements, or additional for projects that are greater than 1 megawatt, depending on specific labor requirements. So we can move on. Thank you. And so this is a summary of the current guidance for those 4 adders that were within the blue bracket. We've been allocated 1.8 gigawatts as the annual capacity limitation. So the projects have to fall within, these specific categories and correlate to, the megawatts that are described for each category are the cap for the program for 2023. And so you can see that in category 1, if the project is located in a low income community, then up to 700 megawatts can be claimed for the year collectively under this low income communities bonus credit program, and so forth and so on. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide again, please. Alrighty. There are also some really meaningful solar equity and energy justice provisions. As Quentin mentioned, that $3 billion in environmental and climate justice block grants, enhance business incentives for solar projects that benefit disadvantaged communities. So energy communities, low income, and tribal lands. And that goes back to the more nitty-gritty details of the provisions that I just outlined. Next, please. And then there's also additional funding for rural communities. And one that Sun has worked very closely with in the past, and that we were really excited to see get so much support, improvement, and expansion, was this $1 billion for the Rural Energy for America program. It's a really great program that's affected. I live here in West Virginia, and so we've worked with rural business owners and farmers who have really been able to, stabilize their monthly budget expenditures and really expand on their operations at their business, whether it means rehiring, expanding their operations, or really just putting more back into the community where they live. I can't talk enough about this program. We actually just came out with a step-by-step guide that's called Your Rural Business Can Go Solar. It's on our website. We'll make sure that you all have the link for that guide as well. It's very comprehensive, and it's a great tool for anybody who's looking or interested into applying for a REAP grant. It will cover up to 40% of your total project costs. So really significant impact with this grant. There's also another $1 billion for rural renewable electrification loans and $9.6 billion for rural electric co-ops. And then that $27 billion for National Green Bank that Quentin mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. And so different ways that we welcome you to take action is to, go solar. It's a really great time to do so. It's also a really great time for batteries, additional panels, updating your panels, and electrifying your home's resources, sharing resources as well. We have many developed resources on our website. I'm always available as a resource to talk through more of these options and provisions, grants. I know it's a lot of information. at once. And so we're here for it all. And I just appreciate your time this evening. I think that's it for me. Next slide. Yep. Pass it back to you, Holly. Thanks again.
Thanks, Leah. All right, and now I'll pass it over to Dan Taylor, the Appalachian Regional Field Director for Blue Green Alliance.
Thanks, Holly, and appreciate you all having me on here. So I'm Dan Taylor. I'm with Blue Green Alliance. Our organization is a coalition of both labor unions and environmental organizations. So beyond just the amazing climate impacts of the Inflation Reduction Act, we are also very interested in the job creation elements of it. So jobs, jobs, jobs. And there's really some huge potential here with this legislation if we implement it correctly. So there was some research recently from the Public Economy Research Institute at University of Massachusetts Amherst. We're basically over the next 10 years, which is the length of most of the programs in the IRA, we have the potential to create up to 9 million jobs from these investments. And that's jobs in renewable energy, that's jobs in bringing the clean energy supply chain back to the US, which is a big priority of ours and the focus of a lot of the programs and incentives in the legislation. That's EVs and clean transit, energy efficiency, and lots of other things. So from an economic development standpoint, as well as a climate standpoint, this is a really impactful legislation and a huge opportunity. And we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Leah already did a really good job of getting into this from a solar perspective. So I'll just touch on a few things here from the sort of recently strengthened clean energy tax credits in the IRA. So beyond solar, there's some other technologies these tax credits cover as well, including onshore and offshore wind, geothermal, battery storage was mentioned, but lots of different technologies. Obviously solar is a huge part of this, but just wanted to, make sure folks had a sense of all the sort of different things that these clean energy tax credits can cover. And we'll go ahead and go to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the labor standards and various things attached to this as well. Because if we're going to create lots of jobs, we want to create lots of good jobs, make sure that folks in the community taking advantage of these opportunities are getting paid what they should to do that. So in order to receive the full value of these clean energy tax credits going forward, developers will have to both pay a prevailing wage and also utilize a certain percentage of registered apprenticeships. So registered apprenticeship programs come in a variety of fashions. Many of them are run by the building and construction trades unions. So electrical workers, carpenters, laborers, etc. And this is really a way to sort of get folks into apprenticeship programs, into workforce development programs, and use these tax credits as a way to create career pathways. And if you're not sure in your community who is sort of offering registered apprenticeship programs, reaching out to your local building and construction trades council is one way to find out. There's often a state agency that sort of handles registered apprenticeships as well. I'm happy to sort of help with guidance there. And another important thing to know, direct pay, that's a huge new component, as Leah mentioned, of these new versions of these clean energy tax credits. In order for whoever the entity is getting direct pay on a tax credit going forward, to get that full amount, it's worth noting that projects must meet these prevailing wage and apprenticeship standards as well. So keep that in mind. The goal is to create good jobs and also combat climate change. And the domestic content stuff that was mentioned earlier, the goal of that is really to incentivize bringing those clean energy supply chains back to the US. So there's sort of both programs in the IRA to incentivize clean energy manufacturing, and then also you have these sort of domestic content requirements that are, supposed to push from the other side. So that's sort of the goal there, why that's in the legislation. We already touched on the community energy communities bonus and the low income bonus. Those are both new and both very, very important additions to these tax credits as well. We can go ahead and go to the next page. I'll talk briefly about some of the investments in the building sector, which are very crucial, as building sector was responsible for about 33% of U.S. greenhouse gas emissions in 2019. And we can go ahead and go to the next slide. And a lot of these resources take the form of tax credits as well. You have the 179D tax credit, which is an energy efficiency tax credit that's historically been for commercial entities. That's been expanded. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then you have 25C, which is a tax credit for sort of residential homeowners for energy efficiency upgrades, and 45L, which is really for developers of multi-family, multi-unit housing to do energy efficiency projects as well. So with 179D has been expanded. Tax exempt institutions can take advantage of this tax credit now. Local government, schools, nonprofits. So that's a big opportunity for expanding the resources for energy efficiency projects. There's some labor standards attached to that as well around prevailing wage and registered apprenticeships to be aware. We've already talked about the residential rebates. Quentin did a great job there. So I'll sort of skip down here and just highlight a couple of things quickly. There's money in the IRA for states and localities to do building code adoption, so raise their building code and the sort of energy standards related to that. That will be implemented through state energy offices. So if you're interested there, reach out to your state energy office. And there's money coming down through HUD for affordable housing developers as well to do sort of green and energy efficiency projects. So your local HUD office will have more info there. I think all that money is forthcoming and the guidance related to that, but should be rolling out, I believe, by this summer. And go ahead and go to the next slide. Oh, I think we went the wrong way. There we go. So a big focus of ours, and what really I think shines through in a lot of the policies in the IRA around energy transition, is the idea that we can't leave workers and communities behind as our energy landscape shifts. We have to specifically prioritize and target federal resources to the communities that are going to need them, and that has to be a deliberate choice. And I think there's some really good policy here around that. And we can go to the next slide. One of those things which we've touched on is the energy communities credit, which basically says communities that have had a coal mine close or coal-fired power plant are prioritized through a bonus for projects. And we talked about the rural renewable energy investments. On the manufacturing side, the 48C tax credit, which is a big driver in sort of bringing those clean energy supply chains back to the US, has a specific set aside for energy communities. So projects that will sort of establish or expand or retool existing facilities in the clean energy supply chain, there's tax credits for that, and they're geared specifically towards the kind of communities we're talking about that need those resources. There's a great loan program through the Department of Energy called the EIR, and Energy Infrastructure Reinvestment Loan Program, which is meant to reuse existing fossil fuel infrastructure, so a closed power plant, things like that, and get those back into productive use in the clean energy supply chain. So that loan program is a resource there that's great to see. And lastly, I'll just mention the IRA also permanently extended the Black Lung Excise Tax, which is the mechanism that funds the Black Lung Disability Trust that provides all the resources to miners and their families who sort of bore the brunt of those impacts over the years. So we were very excited to see that included in the IRA as well. And go to the next slide. And then there's some great community-based investments to reduce pollution in disadvantaged communities in the IRA as well. We can go ahead and go to the next slide there. Methane emission reduction program. So that's a program to assist companies in monitoring and reducing methane emissions. The block grant programs that I believe, we've already talked about, those will be very, very impactful. And actually, let's just go ahead and skip to the next slide, because there's a couple of things there that I really want to drill down on. The climate pollution reduction grant program, that is rolling out right now. That's a $5 billion program for states and some large metro areas to do planning around how they want to reduce climate emissions. States and large metro areas have to opt into this program, and it's a two-stage program. So the first phase is a planning grant, and then there'll be money for implementation work in the second round of that. But you have to opt in for the planning grant to get the implementation money. So if you're not sure if your state has opted in, you should try to find out. I believe that all of the states that sort of in my area, Virginia, West Virginia, and Maryland, are planning to opt in. What those plans are going to look like, I don't know, but always good to do some pushing there. If you live in a large metro area, make sure your metro area is opting in as well. It's very important. And then, rolling out very soon will be the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund money. So funds to support the rapid deployment of low and zero emission technologies in low income and disadvantaged communities. So keep an eye out for that soon. And we can go to the next slide. And then lastly, I just wanted to sort of give an overview of how the money is moving. A lot of this stuff is very confusing. There's a lot of moving parts in the IRA. Due to the sort of structure on how it was passed through budget reconciliation, a lot of these programs take the form of tax credits and tax deductions. So you've seen that sort of throughout what I've talked about, direct pay being a big part of that. You do have some grants in the IRA, as we just touched on too, not as many as in the previous infrastructure bill, but there are some grants, and then loan programs as well. So those are sort of the three primary vehicles for how the money moves. And if you're interested in more of a breakdown, Blue Green Alliance has put together a sort of user guide for both the IRA and the infrastructure bill. I'm happy to share that as well. And with that, I think I'll go ahead and conclude and kick it back to you, Holly.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks everybody for coming. So right now we'll take a couple minutes and answer some of the questions that folks brought up. Let's see. So BC asked, should you upgrade your electrical panel even if your home is electric? Any takers on that question?
I'll just simply say yes, because the amount of electrification that we're talking about doing over the next decade is probably greater than anything any home has seen in the previous decades. So that would be a good first step.
All right, next question. Are there electric tankless water heaters?
That's a good question. I don't know this is
All right. So how about if we lease and not buy an EV, will the tax credit still apply?
Yes.
All right.
Not
And
to the full, I believe, not to the full extent, but there you'll get a percentage of the tax credit, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if you know the exact figure, Quentin, but I believe it applies, but to some.
I think the last thing I saw is that right now is the full, but when the IRS rolls out further guidance, you'll start seeing various different percentages. So that, like I said earlier, Like if you want to go get it, do it now so you can get that full 7,500 if you don't know, because in the next few weeks, months, when the IRS issues that guidance, then all of the intent of the law will be put into place.
All right, and I think Leah is typing an answer about limiting solar panel incentives, or do you want to just answer it out loud?
Yeah, I can answer it out loud. My apologies if it seemed like there was any distinction between rooftop mounted systems and the incentives that were available for them versus a ground mount system. The way that I understand it is that these provisions are applicable to your total project cost. And so somebody had mentioned extra trenching and electrical service for a ground mount system on their small farm. The way that I understand it is that it is your total project cost is what you're available to get the tax liability for.
All right, and we've got about 20 questions, so we might not be able to get to all of these folks, but we'll do our best. So how about IRA rebates for condominiums? How does that work?
Yeah, 100%. So I guess it also depends on what state you live in. We have inhibiting laws here in West Virginia that don't necessarily allow for like community shared power, also known as community solar. And so you know, your solar access laws on a state by state basis will definitely determine whether or not, you know, those larger projects that serve multifamily housing can be achieved. But ideally, if your state does have community solar, or what's called virtual net metering is another way where you could achieve a project size like this, those all of those adders that I spoke about, depending on where you are and if you qualify or your eligibility for the project, in addition to that 30% solar income tax credit, would be something that you would be able to pursue as well.
All right. So Sean Hart wants to know, how do energy communities benefit for renewable energy development? What is their incentive to make these investments, and how do they get a ROI?
I can jump in here. So the incentives are really for developers that want to place projects in energy communities. So I believe it's an additional tax credit of up to 10% for a project that wants to locate in an energy community.
Great. And how about, do we know yet if there's any way for lower income folks who file but don't owe taxes to get tax credits?
Yeah, the way that I understand it is that if you don't have the tax liability to realize the full 30% in one tax year, you can roll that over up to 5 years.
All right, and there's a couple questions about like retroactive tax credits and rebates, and I don't think that things are retroactive, but I'll let somebody else confirm.
No, things are not retroactive. I did see the question about the electric vehicle. If you had to buy your electric vehicle after January 1st to get the tax credit, 2023.
With the residential solar investment tax credit, they are retroactively applying that 30% tax credit to installations that were made in the year of 2022.
All right, and then how about an easy way to figure out what electric vehicles can be bought and which ones apply to the rebate?
I've seen, you could just like Google it. There's like some websites that just have a list of tax credits. I did this search last week, and a lot of the manufacturers are advertising that you can get their car with EV Mitsubishi just had an ad I just saw, like I said last week, like come get a new Mitsubishi car for 7,500 tax credit. So it's really easy to find cars that are available. Companies are going out of their way to promote it.
And my guess is, as we said earlier, when the final guidance rolls out from the Treasury around this, you'll see even more of that, of companies sort of advertising that their vehicles qualify under the credit once we sort of have the final guidance.
All right. And let's see. So someone would like to know if there is a per person cap on these credits and rebates, like if they install solar panels on their current home and then move, would they be able to like get any of these tax credits for installing on a new home?
As far as I know, there's no per person cap.
Yeah, I can't personally speak to that. I know that there are some rules around transferability that we're anticipating come out. And if you're a for-profit entity or a developer, for example, then the transferability is an option. I do know that for nonprofits, it isn't an option, but just, yeah, to reemphasize what Quentin just said, I'm not aware of any specific cap.
All right. And then a couple folks, it seems like, are asking about like religious, like how religious and other tax exempt organizations can apply for these. And that was I think Leah might have answered one of them, but the direct pay, right?
I'm sorry, I have tiny people in the house tonight. Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah. So folks are asked, like nonprofit or tax exempt folks are wondering how they can take advantage.
Yeah, so the Clean Energy Group just did a really awesome blog that breaks down what nonprofit or tax exempt entities need to know about direct pay. And I will drop that link in the chat, and then maybe we could also include it in our follow-up email as well.
All right. I think we're just about at time.
Holly, I see a question I want to address.
Yeah, go for it.
Does anyone have a document that has guidelines for people looking to use the IRA? Yeah, there's plenty out there now. Dan mentioned Blue Green Alliance has a really good guideline, a guidebook, but the White House also put out its own 184-page version of a guidebook. You know, it's a 1,000-page bill, so 184 is pretty decent. So there's a lot of resources. When we do the follow-up email, we're going to send links to the White House version. CCAN has a version. We're going to include Blue Green Alliance. We're going to have all links to these various different resources. And so you will have plenty of tools at your disposal to really take advantage of the IRA, because that is what we want you to do.
All right. And I think we have time for one more. And do we know is there a link to find where the 80% to 150% moderate income amount by zip codes are?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to calculate that is the census you can look up your income level by zip code on the census website. And so if $100,000 is the medium income for your zip code, and then you just do 80%, are you below 80% or above 80% of that 100,000? And that will dictate if you're low or moderate income.
All right. I think somehow we got through almost all of these questions. All right, folks. Well, I think we're at time, and we will be sending a replay of the webinar with the slide deck so folks can dive deeper or show their friends. We're also in West Virginia right now. It was kind of like our launching point. We were doing in-person presentations, just like this, in various cities throughout West Virginia. And then we will be expanding into Virginia and then later into Maryland. So keep your eye out for in-person events if that's something you're interested in as well.
Thank you, Holly, for hosting.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate all y'all coming.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.